Hi guys and welcome to round number 4. This was the first good game by me in the tournament, and my opponent was 2150 rated, and yeah, I got a big advantage quite early. And let's see what happened in the opening. He opened with the Sicilian and I played the Rosolimo variation with bishop b5, avoiding all the main lines with d4, and it's quite a reasonable and good try, which is played by a lot of strong players as well. So let's see what he did. There are many moves at exactly this position black can try, for example d6, g6, e6, knight f6, and yeah, he chose to play knight f6, which I still expected. But after knight c3, he used to play queen c7, so that's what I mainly prepared. But I also checked some other lines, but yeah, with g6, he surprised me a little bit. I had played the same variation before, exactly 1 year ago in the same tournament, and back then I chose to play e5, knight g4, takes, in order that the knight cannot take here, because it has no support, and then bring the knight to the rim and play g4 to make the knight stuck. But somehow I felt this is exactly what he will expect from my side, so I chose to do something slightly different so that he will need to play on his own. So I decided to play h3 with the not so subtle idea going e5 next, and then the knight cannot come here, and yeah, black will need to retreat the knight, and white has some different plans then. He continued with a normal move, bishop g7, and now the knight needs to go back because on h5 it's very likely to be trapped. There's no square available because the f4 square will soon be covered by my bishop, and after, let's say, takes and d3, white is already ready to play g4 and the knight would be in trouble. So that's not the way to go, so he correctly went back. And the knight has some hopes to get back into the game via h6 and f5. So that's quite reasonable still, but white might be slightly better. But we come to a critical position already here, knight e4. So now what could black do? I have attacked this pawn, and my opponent already here decided to sacrifice it, and let me quickly show you why. It's of course possible to protect the pawn, but he was somehow afraid of queen e2, knight comes here, and this check, after which he loses the right to castle because here he would need to give up the dark square bishop. And yeah, in general I think my bishop will be much better because those squares are a bit weak, and yeah, I would be happy here. But still, I think it's quite playable. In the game, I actually thought that this is not such a great achievement, but I had the misevaluation that the knight would come here, but I can actually stop it. But in the game, I was a bit feared by a5, and if I go d3, then bishop a6, but computers telling that here, after something like this, white's position is stable, black king is weak, black cannot really develop, and also this bishop is kind of stuck. So this would be, yeah, have been possible, and black's better defense would be just to take here, if I remember correctly. So he could have just protected the pawn with b6, but he didn't. One more note, if you think this looks like a double attack, this is not entirely true, because I can play queen e2, and bishop e5 is now not possible because of c4. We distract the queen, and no matter where the queen goes, we will win the bishop, for example queen e6 and knight g5, and we have a double attack on queen and bishop, and white is winning. So maybe the other double attack, because there's no fork in the end, so this is probably more precise, because after something like this the knights won't be forked, so this should be more correct. So yeah, that's not working, but yeah, just protecting the pawn is solid enough, I think. Instead, he chose to sacrifice the pawn, and now it's of course the big question for me, can I take this pawn? And I was still kind of in preparation and knew that it's possible to take, So I quickly checked, is there any serious counterplay? And once I saw there should be no trouble, I took the pawn. And now it's up to black to prove what he's having for the pawn, which he could not do successfully, luckily for me. So here white is just already better, and black needs to prove some counterplay. He played queen d5, which is quite logical, centralizing the queen, and after d4 I was mainly expecting b6. I need to retreat the knight, and I was considering such stuff here and activating the bishops and hoping to have enough counterplay with the two bishops for the missing pawn, but I felt that white must be better here because the knights are kind of stable and it's not easy for him to attack my extra pawn, and slowly I will try to improve my position, consolidate, and the bishop won't have a good position any longer. So also here white is better, but black is not losing yet. And after the game move, black was already losing, and yeah. So it would have been better to play b6 and then either queen e4 check or knight f5, which is also similar idea. Just trade the queens here and then say, okay, I have the active bishops, maybe bishop e7, and getting some kind of messy position where finally the bishops might create something, but altogether white should still be better. In the game he played knight to f5, which is not a good move because now I can build a very strong center while also pushing back his queen, which is quite annoying. Now he's not in time to play b6 any longer because I can play c4 intermediate move, and after the queen retreats I can put my knight to this excellent square, and I have a strong center and I can back it up with bishop e2 for example, and white is just a solid pawn up here. So that's why he decided to play b5, but this also doesn't seem great because this knight is now a perfect piece. This bishop is kind of sadly placed and white has a winning position, and I could improve my position even further. I played rook e1 to take the steam out of f6 because I could answer with e6, after which all the pieces would be stuck. So he decided to play bishop e6, which I was also happy about because now he can no longer play f6 because the bishop would always drop. So I just solidified my center, and now I created the threat of pushing c4 and finally setting my extra pawn into motion, and he tried to defend by exchanging some pieces, but basically white is just winning. I played a4 because I wanted to improve the structure a little bit. If I go c4 immediately, he still has this pawn on c6, which keeps my pawn mass from rolling down the board a little bit. It would have been good, but I didn't see all the details, so yeah, that's why I didn't go for it. Here there was a line take, knight comes here, queen d7, and I thought it's not that great. But here are some tactical points like rook c5, which break black's defense because queen c5 not possible. So I didn't decide to go this, but instead I wanted to distract his b pawn, and if he takes I would just push back his queen again and then maybe just go b4, and I have a very solid center now. This pawn will be lost sooner or later, and then I can even put pressure on the other a pawn which is left. So that was the plan, but he did not take. But anyway, I could get rid of this c pawn, and now I can still push c4 with a massive center, and I thought that's very good. Here was probably the only real mistake, where I decided not to take on e6 immediately, which I should have done, because in the game I was aware he should not take with the queen because otherwise my pawns are just rolling, but with the pawn. But also here I get a very similar position like in the game, but with queens on the board, and since his king is weaker I should have preferred this one, and my knight is also ready to jump to e6 very soon. So yeah, white is clearly winning there. Instead I decided to play queen e3 with the idea to protect the knight and be ready to push d5, but yeah, he played rook c8, after which my idea was gone, and Still, white is of course winning with the extra pawn, but it was a bit more difficult. I decided to go knight to g5, now take on e6 and play queen e4 and just go into the endgame with an extra pawn, and black has some weaknesses and this should be winning finally also. Okay, he tried to create some counterplay on my c4 pawn by I can just take and play d5 and win the e6 pawn instead, yeah, as a counterplay. And here I wanted to activate my rook, try to misplace his rook a little bit, and then just go back, threatening d6. And he decided to trade a pair of rooks again, which I think is in general a good thing, because my rooks are quite well placed and his second rook is kind of superfluous. But after knight f3 I can still force him to take, and I can gain the d file, which is very powerful. So if he doesn't want to take, I play d6 and the game is over. So he needs to take, and now he needs to stop this pawn, which is quite hard, and I think he defended okay. Rook a6 was also the only move which I thought would continue the fight. And I tried to play against the other weaknesses, which are the king and the other weak pawns. Maybe I want to come to c7. But he defended well and played rook a5 back, also targeting my pawn. Of course, there are already several ways to win the game, but I decided to repeat moves. And now go g4, pushing back his knight, and now go to the c line again, because now he no longer can play rook a5, because check, king f7, and knight g5 mate. So here it's already difficult. I expected maybe h6 to hide the king, but also here I will just come to the 7th rank, for example, and it's not so easy for him, because king f7 would be answered by something like this, or king f8, not sure. Maybe I just improve slowly. Still, I'm basically 2 pawns up on this wing, which should be enough. Okay, instead he played knight e8, after which the win is quite simple. I played rook c8, pinning and attacking, and my plan is, for example, go here to e6, check the king, and yeah, maybe have some forking ideas on c7. It doesn't work yet, but also I just threatened to take h7 and then play e6, and he played h6, but I still went to h7, and he cannot keep the contact to his knight because king f7 will be answered by e6 anyway, and then he needs to go there and I take an additional pawn, and those 2 far advanced pawns are of course winning the game. In the game it was quite similar. He played king to g7, I took d6, and now I just threw my pawns forward because he has no counterplay, and as soon as his rook will leave the 6th rank I will play e6 with some queening threats. So that's what happened. Rook a2, e6, I'm ready to play check, and d7, and the game finished after rook f8, where he resigned because he cannot stop the promotion. Here there is this intermediate check, and after this I will queen with a winning position. So I hope you enjoyed the game. If you are new to the channel and have not subscribed yet, please subscribe, and I hope to see you next time for round number 5. Goodbye.